Next, we'll have our panelists introduced by Warren and Antje. Over to you, Warren and Antje. Kindly introduce our panelists that will be refreshing us with knowledge this evening. Over to you, Antje.
Thank you very much, Pearl. And hi, everyone. Glad to see you here at the second webinar on the action media methodology. This is, as mentioned, a follow-on from a previous society virtual session, which was held on 30th of August. And in that session, we shared the findings from a poll that showed interest from implementers and researchers in learning more about participatory action media and the methodology. And in that session, we covered the evolution of participatory action media, key principles and practice guidelines, and a social cultural change model. And we had more than 90 participants, which we've seen with delight, and thanks to the society also for registering participants always so well, so that they, you keep a track record also, how the attendance is looking. So that's a good feedback loop. And the presentation from this session and the supplementary readings will be made available, as will be the ones from today. And today we will use the next 30 minutes for presentations from 4 experienced implementers of the action media methodology across several organizations. They have all worked with Warren, and some of them have worked with me to apply action media methods for various purposes and themes. And then you all have a chance to ask the presenters directly about their lessons learned and their applications in different settings. We will take about 15 to 20 minutes for the question and answer session. And then we will try to summarize lessons learned across the different health and development domains. For the questions and answers, you can put your questions, already during the presentations in the chat. If you, to remember what your questions were, we can pick them up afterwards. You can ask them afterwards also in person. Both of it is possible, so please contribute. We would like to hear from you today more than last time, about your questions and what you would like to learn more about. We have one more session in the seminar series, which will be a panel discussion between action media and human-centered design implementers to answer questions about that area of work. But today it will be all about implementation and lessons learned, challenges, lessons learned, how do we overcome them. So over to Warren now to introduce our presenters for today.
Great, hi everyone. I don't know if my video is starting. Can't seem to get my video working, but anyway, we'll just go with that. But hi everyone, my name is Warren Parker. I've been involved, was involved in developing action media many years ago, and have been involved in working with training and implementing action media in very multiple settings. And it's great to be here today with a nice big group of participants and a good follow-on from our last session to introduce some people who've been implementing action media over many years in many different contexts, and expanding also beyond what was the initial focus, which was health, going into some additional areas of work. First up will be Thad Pennis, who's the Technical Advisor for Social and Behavior Change at FHI 360. He's worked on many SBC projects around the world, and through FHI 360 integrated participatory action media as a methodology to provide insights into community perspectives for SBC strategy and programming. This includes using participatory action media to bring about changes in health programming, but also other development issues. For example, recently in education in Rwanda, and also expanding out into that area. Evaline Nakuru is a community health promotion and engagement specialist, working with different communities in Uganda. She's worked on a number of different development projects and was involved in the development and implementation of the USAID Apolou project in Karamoja in northeastern Uganda, which was a project implemented by Save the Children and Mercy Corps. She'll be sharing experiences from that project. Perfectual Lobik, I've been in touch with Perfectual. She's mentioned she's got some technical problems, so hopefully she can get online and share her presentation. But I'll introduce her in the meantime, and then hopefully she'll come on. She's a communications specialist working with Tetra Tech in Ghana. Tetra Tech's implementing the Ghana Fisheries Project, which works with local communities to protect the marine ecosystem. Perfectual and her colleagues were trained last year and applied participatory action media in the fishing sector. And the lessons from that process have been incorporated into the organization's SBC strategy. So she'll speak about that. And then Eben Kiemensa is from the USAID Ghana Accelerating Social and Behavior Change activity in Ghana. He's an organizational development and capacity building advisor in the organization. And he's worked on various health and development projects in Ghana and will bring perspectives on capacity development, including recent training of researchers and communication practitioners in the participation methodology. So I'm very pleased to be able to introduce those very good presenters and practitioners who've used participatory action media over the years and recently and continue to do so. And we'll start off with Thad. All right, as Antje mentioned, we had also based some of the thinking around these sessions on the poll. So you can quickly just see there some of the responses to the poll regarding people's understanding of participatory action media and what they wanted to see. And similarly, where people wanted to be strengthened, and particularly the skills and the challenges mentioned by people were technical skills and institutional policies regarding bringing action media into the programming process. So I think our presenters today will be in a good position to share that. Over to you, Thad.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Antje. Thank you, Pearl, and everybody at the African Society for Social and Behavior Change for inviting me to come and talk to you a little bit today about participatory action media. And I'm going to give it from a program perspective. So as a programmer, I help design and implement largely USAID-funded social and behavior change programs across multiple different countries. And I continue to use this as one of the tools in the toolbox for deployment and for use in countries. So I'm going to give you sort of a broader perspective, and my fellow panelists will come on after me to give a much more specific case-by-case example of how participatory action media is used in countries. Next slide, please. So to start with, I think everybody knows what participatory action media is. From the poll, everybody has a basic understanding, but let me provide a sort of strategic, big picture perspective of participatory action media approaches and how it's a strategic use of a very important social and behavior change tool that we have. PAM, for me, as a program designer and implementer, is really a tool for participant engagement that displaces, I think, the typical expert-driven material design sessions. I think it's all too often we have seen over the course of many, many decades now where new materials or communication materials need to be developed, be it a new storyline, a new poster, a new element, or a bunch of technical experts will get in a room and they will design a program and then display it onto basically an unsuspecting audience. And I think we can all agree that that type of thinking, however practical, is probably not impactful enough for those communities that we are attempting to serve and to engage. And so this tool, from a program perspective, is incredibly useful in achieving two things. One, displacing that expert-driven material design process. And number two, putting the audiences in control of the programming and the strategies that we end up developing. Now, for FHI, this fits nicely within our added model, which was audience developed and designed social and behavior change model, which you can see here on this screen, that really is based upon placing audiences at the center of our programming and building outwards. I think it's always better, and data and evidence begins to show this, that when audiences are engaged as part of that co-creation process, and when audiences are engaged in helping to design the strategy and the program, we get much better outcomes in terms of programmatic elements, because it's no longer a expert recipient type of communication. It's a co-created type of communication where those with technical knowledge sit alongside the audiences and design what works best for them. Operationally, it fits in with a really nice, what I like to call, illicit line of inquiry. Rather than us telling audiences what they need to know, we learn from audiences what they already know, and what are the gaps and areas that need to be addressed to make the programming far more impactful. Secondly, this approach is really self-validating. If you engage audiences, then you are doing the same thing at the same time, validating what they're having to say. It also has a profound effect upon programmatic designs and overall project strategies, because we replace the "I think this is going on in a community," or "I think this is the perspective audiences have," and replaces it with "the audiences told me these are the problems." So it's a very powerful and impactful tool that really is much more elicitive of audiences, and I think makes for much stronger overall programs and projects, which some of my colleagues will talk to a little bit later in this presentation. Next slide. What makes this particularly advantageous? If you could advance the slide, please. Thank you. No, one back, please.
You got
what
it?
makes this? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, other way.
There we
go. Stop. Thank you. What makes this particularly advantage as someone who designs proposals, writes strategies, works with country offices and programs and other partners, is that it's far more oriented towards achieving real goals that are practical, that are self-determined by audiences themselves, that are cognizant of language, culture, really heavily nuanced in the context. It aligns really nicely with what the needs of the communities are, rather than what we think the needs of the communities is. Community-derived programming and problem solving then becomes part of the overall project and program that we end up implementing, because we've engaged audiences in that critical thinking piece about what impacts them the most. It makes for a better strategy, and it makes for better outcomes, because the audiences themselves have played a significant role in developing the content. As you can see here on the screen, there are other advantages to using this in program designs. Community-owned solutions. I don't think there's anybody on this call that would refute that if the community owns not only the problem, but more importantly, has a pathway for solution and resolution, it makes for a much more sustainable outcome and sustainable actions over time. It's been transformative, and personally, we've used this in multiple projects, which you can see here on the right hand of the screen, ranging from HIV/AIDS communities in Bahamas and Jamaica, through fisher folk, to health practitioners in Malawi, and more recently, we've gone outside the health perspective, and we've started using it in the education space, and have found that the application beyond health to education and to other sectors are equally impactful. In particular, we're working in Rwanda, which one of my colleagues will talk more about later, with head teachers and teachers and parents and school administrators on ways to improve literacy using a participatory action media approach to better elicit local solutions to local strategies. And I think more importantly, from a programmatic perspective, I'm a firm believer that this approach is useful regardless of the country or the community or the context. It's the application is simple enough that it's a teachable tool that can be cascaded down to communities and inserted within programs and systems to lead to much better outcomes. Next slide, please. A few slides from some of the programs and projects we've done over the years at FHI, engaging pregnant and expectant fathers in Burundi, to HIV/AIDS communities in Jamaica and Bahamas. Shout out to Angie, because she worked on that program when she still was with FHI. Next slide. To fisher folk in Uganda, health practitioners in Malawi, rural communities in Ghana, teachers and school administrators in Rwanda, all lead to much more beneficial outcomes and makes it much more impactful from a programmatic tool in our toolbox. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That was a great overview, and good to see how Action Media has been expanded into other settings beyond health, and obviously in diverse countries and contexts. So we'll move on to Evaline, who will be presenting on the Apolou project in Uganda.
Thank you, Warren. I will briefly share with you how Action Media research shaped the design and implementation process of the USAID Apollo activity, which was, by the way, implemented and completed just recently. I'll dive straight to what was the Apollo all about. Apollo USAID activity was seeking to support improvement in health and well-being of the Karimojong people. And this was done through diverse activities which were supposed to be supported by SBC. I'm using past tense because the program has already ended, and I'll just share with you some of the key highlights. SBC strategy in this program was cross-cutting. It was aimed at integrating and coordinating the behavior change aims of different sectors. The sectors including maternal and child health, WASH, livelihoods, among others. So we really wanted to ground the SBC strategy by drawing on community problem-solving capacities and their self-efficacy to become change makers. So that was the whole idea about Apollo and the SBC strategy. Next slide, Warren. Why the Participatory Action Media for this particular project? Karamoja region is a bit unique, and so we thought about using the Participatory Action Media in order to ensure contextual relevant communication. I mean, the communication which builds on existing knowledge and that which incorporates the indigenous solutions to health challenges. We also wanted to explore the audience perspective, their reflection, their insights, and problem-solving capacities, and these capacities towards the development of the communication products that we wanted to use, the concepts for the SBC and the whole program. The Participatory Action Media was also an alternative to a top-down targeted communication, which enabled us discuss on context, challenges, and capabilities of the intended audience in the region. So Action Media also was to kind of deepen our understanding of the participants' context. I earlier on said this region is a bit unique because so many factors. So we wanted to understand their perspective, the potential for action in exploring the healthy issues. So this was done right at the beginning of the program, and it was applied to basically achieve insights into health circumstances of the pastoral community and also identify appropriate SBC approaches and channels. Next slide. I thought about sharing with you how it was done. Briefly, Action Media brought different participants. The women you see there were also part of them, among others. The participants were encouraged in small group-led discussions, which allowed interaction without being impeded by the presence of the research team. Like, the research team was quite a big number, doing different things, and so that is how it was done. I remember we did more of the songs, the games, illustrations, the role play, and of course the subsequent dialogues related to action and problem solving. I earlier on said, because of the uniqueness of this region in terms of also literacy. So those are some of the things we did. And of course, it included building trust with the audience right on the onset of the sessions. All the sessions within the week that we conducted this, we had to build trust with the audience. It elicited the transparency, openness all through the sessions, and of course improved the potential to gain insights into some of the topics which were not typically discussed in the public domain. So that is how it was done. The next slide. The key insights that came up out of how it guided and shaped. We were able to explore various values and concerns among the communities. I would share with you some of the values which are not really unique. For example, people valued living in peace and harmony, having good health at household level, household hygiene, being able to feed the family, and among others, education was one of the values. But of course, there were also other concerns including theft, sexual violence, alcohol abuse, which was a bit interesting. For we got people's perspective about alcohol abuse in a different way. For us, we thought in a different way, and we got their perspective differently, like how alcohol is actually not bad. It's when you drink to the stomach, you're good to go, but when you drink like to your head, that's when alcohol gets. That was their perspective. So we're able to get these concerns, these values, and by the way, which we integrated into some of the SBC activities, discussions, although it wasn't part of what we intended to do, but because this came out of the term, so we had to integrate. One more key insights that came was like concerns could be addressed through consensus on certain community held values, rather than just simple messaging. For example, participants suggested that we re-establish respect for traditional processes, which the program later re-emphasized even in the SBC strategy, how we worked with traditional leaders as influencers. So it reaffirmed the plan we had. And also issues around theft, some of the concerns, like the people were giving their insights about how most of these concerns can actually be addressed through consensus and the held values. Another key insights that came out and it guided the intervention was the SBC approaches should be really less individualistic, but rather we needed to work with community groups. I think you remember the story of the goat, where people felt bad and jealous when one person has benefited. So we had to reshape the way the plan we had, even in the livelihoods team, even in the maternal and child health team to reshape our plans and work, avoid individualistic kind of approach, and embrace the community groups. And of course, re-established respect for traditional processes in creating solutions. Family and Manyata level dialogue was valued. Here in the region, people live in Manyatas, and such dialogues were very much valued, which we had to make sure that even in the design of some of the communication channels, it was done. The longer engagement during the PAM, the action media research, deepened the understanding of participants' knowledge and perspective. And finally, one of the key action insight that came up and supported us in the intervention is the findings of action media, participatory action media, led to an applied SBC campaign, which supported reflection, dialogue, while incorporating the local solutions. So we did less of the messages and did more of the reflection, the dialogues, because that's what came out strongly in the media results. The next slide, Warren. The recommendations that also supported us, I thought it wise to share with us. The Participatory Action Media tailored the SBC campaign effectively for the program by encouraging community-led dialogues and reflection. I talked about it. Less messaging, amplified positive group deviance and collective action, and also linked processes to the existing group formation. At the beginning of the program, there were a lot of group formation of the mother care groups, the resilience action committees, among others. So these were good linkages for us because we had already got insights from the action media. And of course, recognized and bolstered a positive orientation for traditional practices, supported accountability through local governance. So the local governance structures were highly important for us. And lastly, it guided the creation of the main communication channels for the program, which included the radio magazines. The radio magazines were amplifying community self-organization, also including myth busting. In this region, we have a lot of cultural, deep cultural practices. We are guided by so many myths and misconceptions that we did. So the radio magazine was one of the best communication channel, and we were guided through the action media findings. The trigger videos addressing social gender norms, improving reflection on the local solutions, among others. And of course, the main channel for us was IPC through the Manyata Wagon, experiential Manyata Wagon shows, where the audience would come and practice behaviors. Considering the fact that these are not really educated communities, so it helped a lot, it shaped, and also it guided in the creation of other concepts for the program. For example, the jingle, I call it the campaign theme song, which, by the way, I think it has turned out to be one of the best up to date, because it is an idea that came out of the action media, and of course it was a low-cost communication media which was done together with the community. Yeah, so that was some of the recommendations that we implemented. I think the last slide, please. I want to share with you a few challenges, because not all was smooth. The strategy, the SBC strategy and the concepts were always not well understood by the program implementers, especially in the first 2 years of the USAID Apollo implementation. I can give an example during the creation of the silent trigger videos as a communication channel. The team didn't expect, they expected videos, trigger videos, which had messages, which portray messages already, compared to what, it was contrary to what action media findings were guiding the SBC strategy, the path they were guiding the SBC strategy to. And so it took us some time to take them through capacity building and also resharing the action media research so that we are following the right thing. Also, the radio magazine stories, the first batch of the radio magazine stories we produced were more of individual perspective than the communal group perspective that we expected and that we wanted. So this was done by community radio reporters, but again, we had to go through a series of training, sharing the action media, participatory action media findings, and helped the program team reshape their thinking towards reflection, dialogue together with the community. So I would just conclude by saying that the participatory action media findings confirmed the relevance of the program, Apolou program, like the theory of change. For example, increasing the people's confidence among the men and women in problem solving, their capacities, their innovation to address some of the issues. But of course, also in the development of a central SBC campaign brand. So action media findings confirmed and also reshaped the way we implemented the SBC strategy until the end. So I would like to end here and over to you, Warren. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Evaline. Yeah, I think the examples shared by Thad so far and also Evaline just show the diverse settings that one can implement participatory action media in, but also I think Evaline's presentation brings home the understanding that it really involves a kind of think different approach. Programs start off with their funding in a context where the proposal is pretty much mapped out what the project is going to look like. And one of the things that happened in this particular program was that the action media findings considerably shaped the interventions that followed, and I think was done very well. We do have reports on various of the projects mentioned by Thad and also this one. So we'll chat with the ASSBC team to see if we can host some of those to share the reports of the outcomes. There's a recent assessment of the Uganda project, for example, and a number of other reports on the implementation of action media in these other settings. I've been chatting to Perfectual online, and she's had some technical challenges, so we're trying to resolve those. But in the meantime, we'll move on to the presentation by Eben from Ghana, and then follow that with the presentation from Perfectual. Thanks so much. Over to you, Eben.
Thank you, Warren. I'm going to approach this from one health system student perspective, and also from experiences of community members utilizing this approach to facilitate development of health behavior change products. In Ghana, USAID ASBC activity, ASBC means Accelerating Social and Behavior Change. Activity works with Government of Ghana, Ghana Health Service, local CSO implementing partners, international development partners to achieve measurable progress in 3 key results area. 1, Government of Ghana leads, harmonizes, and manages effective SBC program at all levels. Communities demanding, identifying, and implementing practical solutions to address barriers to healthy behaviors and practices. and also for private sector, promoting healthy behaviors and practices to support the public health agenda.
Is that the correct slide?
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So the ASB's interventions addresses individual, social, and structural determinants of priority behaviors to improve uptake of healthy behaviors and health indicators in Ghana. ASB emphasizes use of participatory approaches, co-designing, co-delivering with audience, as Tad mentioned earlier. The action media approaches inform the design of the ASBC activity. So we identify participatory action media as a powerful tool for engaging with prospective audiences in facilitating health behavior change. Prior to rollout of this activity in Ghana, we did SBC capacity assessment, and we identify a gap with Ghana Health Services promotion staff in the area of use of participatory action research. So this intervention is designed to break that gap and also to undertake a research related to uptake of family planning services. We started with a training workshop with 14 researchers and communication practitioners, equipping them with the approach. We have representatives from Health Promotion Division, Ghana Health Service, our CSO implementing partners. They're starting off as having a good appreciation of multi-year projects that draws from participatory action media findings to ensure that we have a good understanding of what the approach can do. As we observe, the participatory approach allowed for skills sharing, hands-on application prior to the community interventions. We had a facilitation skills building on the participatory action research with health promotion staff as well as CSO partners for them to have a hands-on experience before the deployment. And I'll outline the steps that we took to facilitate this. So the starting point was the community entry, the community that we went to do the full practical. Prior to that, we've had the session where we had the hands-on facilitation skills, equipping the government of Ghana health promotion staff with the key competencies in terms of facilitating the processes. Just after that, we went to the community, engaged with the chief, a key community leadership to get their support, get them to appreciate the research that we are coming to undertake, identifying the sites where we will hold the discussions, who we expect to be part. And I have also observed that the participant selection is structured. So action media, although it's an emergent process, it's also grounded in rigor in terms of the research process, starting with the research protocols that align some participant selections, ethical guidelines, confidentiality. So although it's an emergent process, also grounded in terms of a rigorous research process. Then I indicated earlier that the government of Ghana health promotion staff, in the capacity assessment that we did, we observed a gap in terms of SBC technical competencies. So the facilitation skills bridge that gap and strengthens how to engage small group, facilitate discussions, providing the needed support as the issues emerge, modeling appropriate behavior as a facilitator, for participants to emulate. So it draws on strength-based approaches from the very onset. So this makes participants relax. And as I go on further, I will share some insight from the community members, what we saw on day 1 and day 2 and the ensuing day. So as the facilitator has a key role in modeling the behaviors that we expect participants to reflect. And it's grounded on respectful engagement. First, setting the scene for participants to express themselves freely in the language of their choosing. We had an interpreter with us, selected from the community. And so this gives the participant opportunity to express themselves well. Even for those of us who are educated, we work with the English language, we have difficulty expressing our innermost thoughts because English is not our first language. So giving up community members opportunity to express themselves in their own local language, it helps to bring out key insights that we could have lost if they were to speak in a language that they are not comfortable with. And also building the trust building that helps to get them relaxed. We also observe that, as they say, people who are affected by a problem have a better understanding of the issue than outsiders. So giving them this platform help them to express themselves, to bring out the issues that were hindering uptake of family planning services. So basically, the study sought to understand culturally and contextually grounded community perspectives and barriers that challenges uptake of family planning services. So we had groups based on the social dynamics. We had young females. So within the young female groups, those that had children, those without children, then we had young men as well. So this helps them feel comfortable to delve deeper to their own issues, because they feel comfortable in their own small groups. They were able to delve deeper, discuss issues, and bring insights that we would have lost if we had messed them up. And as they bring up this insightful thoughts, we have an illustrator also capturing this and also validating the issues with them. So we observe that within a short period that we were engaging, there were multiple media products being developed concurrently. For example, we had content for interpersonal engagement. We had content for mass media that could be used for mass media, and we have content that can be used to facilitate group and community engagement. Among the group that facilitated the discussion was one of our media partners, and it was quite insightful to him because as a creative developer, normally the creative team sits down, develop the concepts, they go to the community to validate before they come back to refine. But this time when we had the community members themselves coming out with the media communication products, validating it themselves, and it helps to speed up the process. By the time we were leaving the community, some of the communication products that have been developed had already gone viral. They had their manifestos that were developed, songs that emerged instantaneously. There's this popular breathing Tenapuri. Basically, we stopped what we were doing. And by the time we were leaving the community, it was like it has gone viral. Everybody was using it as a form of greeting. So I see Action Media as an empowering process, engaging community members to come out with solutions that are practical and easily to implement, because they themselves are going to lead in the implementation process. In the picture that is being projected at the moment is Azara, prior to participating in the session. She's not held a pen before, but she was able to craft out illustrations, some of which are being refined, and this is going to be projected in the community to communicate positive health behavior change. So overall, it is an empowering process, emergent, yes, as well grounded in terms of the research process. So these are the insights that I want to share. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Eben. Yeah, so I think what Eben has done in his presentation as well has shown how how training processes are integral to people who are communication practitioners and researchers, understanding new and different ways of thinking about how one communicates and how one implements SBC and how one designs SBC strategies, and in particular working away from some of the methodologies that people might have been fixed on using previously, particularly ad agencies and other specialist agencies who tend to come up with the creative concepts and pre-test them rather than derive them from the bottom up. And as Eben mentioned as well, you can see the immediate traction of some of these concepts. As he mentioned, the slogan being used in the community straight after it came out of the meeting, so out of the research session. So that's great. And then also, yeah, the unexpected outcomes. It was quite surprising for someone at the end when we spoke about what they'd gotten out of the action media processes. And Azara mentioned it was the first time she'd used a pen, which is an unexpected outcome. But we've noticed this before as well in other settings where action media includes use of drawing and illustration and so forth. So that's an outcome there.
And congrats in the meantime to the Society for all the different chapters. I am in awe. I will connect a couple of more people also from Egypt. Fabulous. Great work.
Great. Okay, I can go ahead and share now. So welcome, Perfectual. Sorry, Perfectual had mentioned she had some technical problems, but hopefully it's all resolved and we have a presentation on the screen now. So over to you, Perfectual.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So my name is Perfectual. I am the Social and Behavior Change Communication Specialist for the USAID Ghana Fisheries Recovery Activity. Today I'm going to be sharing some of the amazing things we've been able to achieve or have started and will continue using participatory action media. The fishery sector in Ghana is quite a technical one. Usually you need to be in the sector to understand or appreciate how technical it is. The project works across a number of strategic approaches. We mainly are working towards reducing illegal fishing practices in Ghana. We are also working to reduce gender-based violence in fishing communities and in fisheries issues, and also mainstream gender in fisheries management. We also work in reducing child labor and trafficking, which is very much present in fishing communities in Ghana. We received a training from Warren sometime last year on how to use participatory action research and participatory action media. We then replicated it in a number of communities, fishing communities. We did one in Elmina, in the central region of Ghana, one in Oshie in the Greater Accra region of Ghana, and one in Atsim in the western region of Ghana. So what you see on your screen is the various engagements that we had, and you will see some of the beautiful posters that the fishers themselves came up with. So based on those illustrations that they developed, we drew upon that and then went ahead to develop some other posters. What's on your screen are some of the posters in different languages in Ghana. So aside English, we replicate all the messages in 5 other coastal community languages. We are adding one more to increase our reach. Next slide. These are still some of our posters on GBV, and we got all this input from the fishers themselves. We also produce jingles and animations based on their feedback. Next slide, one. Again, these are still some of the posters that we developed with their feedback. Next slide. The next one. And we have mounted some of these billboards across the nation. Some are as far as in the north of Ghana, based on the various topics that we're working on. Please, next slide. So, aside the communication materials that we develop with their feedback, that is posters, animations, jingles, we also, the fishing community in Ghana is quite an entertaining community. They love to sing, they love to dance, they like to act. So for us at USID, Ghana Fisheries Recovery Activity, we really want to harness that community love for entertainment to get messages across to fishers, because it's usually through entertainment that we are able to catch their attention. So we decided to leverage flash mobs, which are usually dances, to do flash mob dramas in fishing communities. So we go to the coast, some cultural display starts, and then drama is done. A drama on responsible fishing is acted out, and it draws a lot of crowds. And we got this kind of feedback from the fishers themselves. Though they didn't give us the idea for the flash mob, but the inspiration was from the fact that they love messages to be delivered to them through these means. So we've had a couple of flash mob dramas across landing beaches in Ghana, and it's been very, very impactful. We get feedback immediately where people even come to us and point to us that maybe this man is involved in illegal fishing methods, or this man has lost his fingers or his hand because the person engaged in dynamite fishing. Next slide. Also drawing from the Participatory Action Media, we decided to do smaller engagements. Again, we drew from folklore in Ghana. Those times back then in Ghana, you see our forefathers bring us together in a circle around the fire and tell us some nice stories, and they are able to share nuggets of wisdom. So we decided to on that and do some by the fireside engagements. Usually, most of the engagements are very serious. You have the Fisheries Commission officials, and they are discussing like serious, let me say, hardcore fisheries issues. But drawing on the engagements that we had with them during the Participation Action Media, they just say that, see, don't meet us in hotels and conferences. Come to us, come to the landing beach, come and listen to what we have to say. So based on that, we came up with something called peer-to-peer engagement on the fireside, where we go to the landing beaches, put them around the fire. We are roasting maize, we are roasting groundnuts, we're roasting plantain, and then we're having discussions. We also do a lot of singing and dancing of their traditional songs, so to keep the engagements entertaining, light, but still remain on our target. And in these engagements, we come up with actions. In participatory action media, you come up with them, or research, you come up with a manifesto. So that's what we are drawing over here. We are able to come up with actions, and we will support the communities in implementing these actions. Next slide. So we still to come. We still will produce a number of communication materials again, and we will want to continue with our education entertainment, where we're going to have community drives, and these community drives, we're going to have some music artists or stars in Ghana from these fishing communities join and help us disseminate insignia. So from the Participatory Action Media, we're able to develop insignias and other things that we will print out and share in the community and have them hang them on their canoes. We also will support them to have their own discussions at the landing beaches. The landing beaches in Ghana have what we call they have these local public address systems, and they want to be the ones to tell their story. So we'll be supporting them to do that. And also, we will continue our conversations, our by the fireside conversations, and we will be doing a lot of mural painting. This is also a means to get the community involved in the actions. We will work with a muralist, and we go to the communities, engage them, get to know for some of the communities, they've already told us what they want. So we will still engage them and have the muralists train and work with the community members to put up these murals, and we will document it. We also want to award good practices. There's a community, for example, called Azizania, and they're surrounded by a lot of people or communities that are engaged in light fishing, which is illegal in this country. And so, but they have been able to remain steadfast and not to engage in light fishing. So we want to reward their behavior by putting up a billboard in their community that says that we are responsible fishers in Azizania and we do not engage in light fishing. And some of these suggestions came up from some of these engagements. Next slide. And then we also want to institute awards. From the engagement, we realized that people felt that we are living exemplary, we have exemplary attitudes and practices, but even though we understand that implementation is a struggle, but they want us to be able to award or reward people that are doing the right thing. Now, we are also going to implement or do participatory action media in marine protected areas. As part of fisheries management, you need to have marine protected areas, and we are going to use participatory action media to engage people in these communities on the strategy, on the communication strategy, and the communication materials that need to come up. Thank you so much. This is the last. This is it for me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Perfectual. That was great. And thank you to all our presenters for their excellent presentations. And I think what we've come out of through the 4 different presentations is perspectives from different angles on how participatory action media can be applied. I think in the last presentation and the presentation by Evaline, you can see how branding connects to the activities, or connects the activities together, but also builds ownership around a concept. In Uganda, it was Eyokian, which is our conversation. And I think what certainly is reinforced is that one's moving away from this individual-focused type of communication into community and communal types of activities and communication and social and behavior change processes underpinned by that, or it supports those processes. Manifestos was something that was also mentioned, which is very useful for spelling out community values and actions including a vision for the future. I'll leave it there. I'm going to hand over to Antje now to coordinate the questions. Thank you very much for all of your attention, and questions are welcome. Over to you, Antje.
Thanks, everyone. This was very interesting presentation of the real application on the ground and with communities, which is really often mentioned, but often people don't really know how it's done effectively. So I really hope that we're making a contribution to this area of work. We had in the chat from Lillian a couple of questions which I think we've answered. So take a look at the chat. Question was if there has been a community capacity strengthening or community capacity assessment before strategy development, and it was a bit more complicated than that. Working with partners that have different parts of a project, and so there was a governance assessment, but not really across all the other sectors. And that is where Action Media comes in and is quite helpful, because it is not just an assessment where we ask questions about capacity, but it's more about, what are community priorities, what are values, how is the current practice in the community, compared to the values that communities actually keep. And that is often a great angle to start SBC strategies. They could be values-based, reminding people what they actually want, how they actually would like to live, and what it is that they're doing at the moment. So good question, and I hope Evaline and I answered it. And if not, please come in. And we're happy to have your live questions. They don't have to be in the chat. They can be just like that. So please, if you have specific questions to the presenters, to Warren, to me, or other questions as well, let us hear from you. Anything goes. Yeah, Abdul, please go.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone online. That's very good presentations from the various presenters. I really enjoyed, and I think my time has been worth joining the session. I want to ask the tool. Is there an M&E tool attached? What I want to find out how you assess the commitments made by both community and service providers, as whether there's a tool to assess the commitments made by both service providers and communities as you develop the project and implement it. Thank you.
So question, and maybe Warren, you come in on that one as well, and everyone else, how do you monitor and assess what is actually being implemented after the commitments? Is that your question, Abdul?
Yeah, I can come in there. That's as I understood it. So I think one of the things one needs to think about, and indeed is super important to do, is not abandon any existing thinking around monitoring and evaluation of the program. But one might need to adapt the way you monitor and evaluate these types of activities, because one's not really measuring individual behaviors as much as one's interested in measuring community actions and the outcomes from those actions. So I can share the example of a project we ran in South Africa on dealing with violence against women and gender-based violence, which was strongly oriented around people taking action in groups and individually in the community to address occurrences of gender-based violence. And the system we had there was people could send a message to a common number via cell phone, and we'd phone them back and have them relate a story of an action that they'd undertaken. And we documented these actions as we went along, and actually used those insights and findings to share video clips and audio clips and news stories and event-based sharing of the actions that have been taken. And that in itself, that monitoring actually created an impetus to further action, because people could see what you could do. What was very interesting with that was that we didn't predetermine what the actions might be. People came up with their own unique actions, and it was very interesting to see how those unfolded. For example, in gender-based violence programming, quite often there's a lot of focus on the victim or the survivor. In many of the cases, the actions taken included people wanting to sit down with both parties and to engage them and to work through accountability, counseling, and other issues. So that was very interesting. The Uganda project was monitored in a fairly conventional way as the program activities unfolded. And then at the end of the project, we conducted a fairly comprehensive assessment of what the outcomes were, to derive a model and link things to theory of change and so forth. But it was very useful to see the kind of process. I think one of the other challenges is that when one works on community-based or group-based activities, change actually happens as you're going along. So what you monitor might change as you move along, because the change is a dynamic process, and that's exactly what you want to bring about. You want to be bringing about change, not just a sort of static program over 5 years that does certain things that you can count. So that's it from me, but I welcome inputs from the presenters as well, and anyone else too.
So I wouldn't say that we have, let's say, some hardcore tools to measure, but we do a lot of field monitoring, and also we have a database of the communities and what they have committed to. For us, we are usually always on the field. If not me, other team members are on the field, and we are able to visit communities and see what is being done so far, and how we actually can support. The good thing for us to also make sure that we are monitoring is the fact that we have budgetary allocations to supporting them in implementing those actions. So at the end of the day, that you have it as part of your work plan, and you are actually following up to make sure that that activity which is in your work plan is actually implemented. And I'll also say that for us, we are actually currently having a full cycle moment where the people we engage, or the participants of the PAM, are currently here with me in a workshop where we are looking at all the materials and what we have done so far, and also they updating us with what they have done so far and what can be done. Thank you.
Thanks, Perfectual. And I see that Thad has his hand up also with regard to the monitoring point.
Yes, with regard to the monitoring point, it's a very good question. And as a program designer, I see the participatory action media approach and methodology really being used to service the more overarching project level indicators. In large scale programs where you're doing national level work or even regional level work, you have a set of indicators that you're trying to move the needle on, either family planning or reproductive health, or water, sanitation, nutrition, education. The model is best served by how well the PAM approach, and its usefulness impacts those overall higher level indicators. Now, you could certainly, if you wish, design and implement specific level indicators, specific monitoring and evaluation programs to evaluate the particular outcomes of a PAM intervention. But from a programmatic point of view, where I'm looking at much larger indicators, the PAM approach feeds into those indicators. So if I see movement in that area, I'm going to see that, yes, we are making impacts upon people's perceptions, people's attitudes, people's social norms, people's behaviors. And that's the validation I'm looking for.
Right, and I think, thanks, Thad. That helps to respond to Maureen's question with the beautiful spelling of my name. I'm collecting those, by the way, so you're not the first. I think we need to distinguish a little bit between quantitative and qualitative methodologies in monitoring and evaluation. and participatory action media is a qualitative approach. There are methodologies to code the inputs that we're getting from action media, and Warren can, I think, is best placed to elaborate a little bit on how that works. So the data obtained through action media, often in formative fashion, but also can also be used for evaluation, are qualitative, which means they're not used with statistical tools, but there are tools to code basically responses. And I think that kind of gets us to a really important point. How do we can we generalize data, and which ones, which insights, happen to be most important? How do we make those selections? So I'm bringing that into the discussion, and I hope that Warren can talk a little bit more about that point. And I hope, Maureen, that answers your question. Just last point, the action media data, the qualitative data can be triangulated with quantitative data, with pre and post evaluations, as that mentioned. As kind of qualitative data in the middle of quantitative pre and post baselines, so that's quite possible, but in and onto itself, it's a qualitative method. So over to Warren.
Great, yeah, thanks very much for that question. So I worked a lot with large-scale surveys in the 90s and 2000s, quite a lot of surveys on HIV and related social and behavior change. And the challenge with the quantitative survey, if you're thinking of a kind of baseline, midterm or endpoint type of survey, is you need to figure out how to ask a question that deals with the things that we're interested in, which is not really so much individual behaviors as much as it is actions that people have been taken in the social domain. So have you spoken to someone else about X, or have you worked in a group to do something? What kinds of things did you do, and so forth? And it's quite difficult to predict at the outset what those kind of questions should be. So that is somewhat of a challenge. But one can apply kind of before and after surveys if one wanted to go that route, thinking carefully about how one would ask the questions. The other way we did it, again, going back to the gender-based violence prevention program, is that we were able to look at the qualitative data that came in where people spoke about the actions that they had taken, and to actually codify that into discrete types of things. So we could codify by looking at whether the actions taken were individual or group oriented, whether they were taken by men or women or groups of people, what kinds of actions they were they things to do with bystander interventions, were they things to do with responding to something in the neighborhood, were they things to do with like a specific occurrence within the family and so forth. So one can code qualitative data like that and come up with quite useful percentages to look at your domains of change. And there's a report I can share. As I mentioned earlier, we're hoping to share various reports through ASSBC, and I'll put it on there, and you'll be able to see through that report how things were quantified. So there are ways to do it, and of course, quantification is something that's very desirable from the point of view of funders and so forth, who always want to be able to boil change down to a number. And it's much harder to explain the sort of more profound changes that happen or reflected in qualitative data. I'll leave it at that, and we can move on to other questions.
There is no right or wrong, anything goes.
Antje, I raised my hand.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
So I wanted to find out that at the Apollo Hours, an activity at the end, you mentioned in the chat that you relied on the most significant change approach to evaluate the SBC programming. How do the findings from the Evaline reflect on the formative, which was done through action media? Is there any, could we correlate the findings?
So how basically do the action media results line up with what we found in the most significant change? Yeah?
Yes, that's the question. Yeah,
yeah, good question. Warren, Evaline, you want to come in? I can also mention something, but I think what we've seen is that our approach actually worked quite well, which was designed based on the Action Media results. So Warren and Evaline, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I think so. Most significant change is also kind of evolving methodology for evaluation. It's been around for quite a while, and it relies on people sharing stories about their engagement with the program or things that they undertook or did during the program. And what happens through that evaluation process is you distill out what seems to be the most significant changes that have been brought about through the implementation of the program. Some of them may be things that are not anticipated at the outset. But I think in the case of the Apolou program, there was a very strong set of principles established at the beginning. So there were certain things that came out of the Action Media program that didn't actually ultimately go into the program itself. For example, we had very strong findings in the Action Media process around alcohol abuse, because there was a widespread availability of alcohol at the time, high strength alcohol. And what happened though, that there were various regulations that actually dealt with that. So that actually by the end of the project was not a central issue, but it was also not a focal area for the project. So sometimes you find out things in the Action Media process that may not translate into programming. But broadly speaking, the principles were the key thing that came out of that Action Media engagement, really about the communal ways of doing things, respecting traditional structures and focusing on key issues in ways that groups could address them. I think I just recall one of the things that came out of the final assessment, which I would say was be a most significant change and not necessarily like absolute across the program. But one of the things that happened in that program was that young boys or young men who were in this pastoral community spend most of their days out in the fields tending cattle, and very much at a distance from their homes, and so in doing that missed out on schooling and so forth. So one of the pieces of the program was to bring young people back into schooling. And when we were doing the assessment, we asked people what had changed for them, and one young man started with a stick scrawling on the ground, and we've got a little video clip of that, and he was asked what is he doing, and he said, I'm writing. And they asked him, what is he writing? And he said, I'm writing my name. And that was something he hadn't been able to do prior to the project. It was a very moving kind of example of how the project had brought about this change, that he'd been able to come back and get back into schooling and to be able to write. So it's a small sort of narrow kind of outcome, but an amazingly profound one at the same time. So there are lots of other things. But to come back to your question, Ken, I think it's really about understanding how these principles that are derived at the beginning are carried through into the program design and are useful for us understanding the outcomes, many of which we can't predict at the beginning.
Well,
maybe
go ahead, Jan.
Yes, I would maybe add on what Warren is saying. There were some of the principles that came up in Action Media. That I think the most significant change, and of course Mexico, the Prime, also conducted the outcome harvest exercise recently during the closure, and of course strongly there are some of the values, the principles, for example peace and harmony, that came out from this different monitoring exercise. And I think also during the process, that's why Mexico, being the Prime, introduced the EXIL, the peace and governance intervention, which I think was integrated into Apolou through the governance sector. So there are some of the principles that were actually carried forward from the Action Media findings to throughout the implementation, and came out during the monitoring, the most significant change and outcome harvest, which Mexico conducted recently. But as for the end evaluation, I think I haven't got in touch with the team to find out what exactly, but I think soon we will share that report with all of us.
maybe we add, I mean, Kenneth, you were, also involved with your group to do a lot of the monitoring of the experiential component, and also, work on, we try to work on the panel that Sad mentioned. So between, the overall large base and end line, we try to do community panels to have check-ins on a regular basis to figure out what qualitatively is happening in households or, in manyatas with regard to the behaviors that we were, helping people to practice and to try out. And I think those monitoring reports were super important to have during implementation, to figure out what changes need to happen in implementation, how things are reaching. So this kind of real-time monitoring is for SBC and especially for things that have been developed with Action Media are super important to kind of pick up on the complexity of things and how things evolve, basically. And based on these 3 different data sets, we were able to formulate, I think, change trends basically in gender norms, but also with regard to several behaviors. So back to you, Kenneth. I think we're coming to an end. Yes, I agree, Evaline. Dreamline did fantastic work on Apolou, but we've seen basically several implementations now using Action Media in various different ways in different sectors, also beyond health, as you have seen. And I hope that we've shown some lessons learned in these different sectors and addressed some of the challenges that people have encountered. There is one more session in this series on Action Media, but before I get to that, please, Warren, do you have any final words?
Not much more from my side. Thank you so much, Antje. And just to really thank everyone for their presentations. I think it was certainly successful. I saw we had more than 70 participants on this one, which is great. Great to be able to share with such a wide group. One thing to add is that a lot of people have been trained in the Action Media methodology, so there are opportunities to reach out and network for those of you who've raised questions about where can you learn more about the methodology through the materials we share as well. And in Ghana, we're actually working on a training manual that'll follow on from the training that we did there recently. So that might be a resource that could be used more widely, and that's through FHI 360. But overall, thanks very much. And I guess over to the ASBC team to round off, and perhaps we can also talk about the forthcoming session as well. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Learning is surely the beginning of wealth, and we surely appreciate the wealth of knowledge our panelists have shared with us this evening. Antje and Warren, we thank you for facilitating the session. I believe we've had such a great session this evening. Please make sure you save the date, 4th October 2023, for our final webinar series. You surely don't want to miss out, because this already has intrigued us in finding us and learning more in the next session. So as we sign out, save that date, 4th October. Have a lovely evening, and thank you very much for joining.